Hey everyone, Mr. Mase here. This is a guide for round 6 of the FIA Manufacturer Series 2021 season taking place at Tokyo Expressway South Inner Loop. Let's get this started. For the Dodge Viper, I had the brake balance at +1 for time trial and qualifying, but for the race, I had the brake balance at +3. Your first braking point, just as you go under the 50-meter board, brake hard for a short moment, ease off of the brakes as you turn in, and get on the throttle as soon as you can. You want to try to get a really fast exit without hitting the walls. Let's fast forward through this. Your next braking point in between the 150 and the 100 meter board before you pass the light post on the left. Brake hard for a short while, ease off of the brakes as you turn in, and do lots and lots of throttle control. Keep at least 2 wheels in between the white lines because the track limits here are pretty strict. Set yourself up so you can get a fast exit out of the docks. Bring yourself towards the left, and your next braking point is just after you pass the 50-meter board before the light post on the left. Just use a little bit of braking, nice and easy on the throttle, and by the time you're pointing towards the shadow of this building, then that's when you can start to fully accelerate. In a moment, we'll fast forward through this. Just try to take a nice tidy line through the tunnels. Once again, nice and tidy line. Bring yourself towards the left, and your next braking point is just after you pass the 150 meter board. In a moment, you'll see exactly where I start to brake, and you're pretty much going to be going for a late apex, which you'll see in a moment. So brake hard for a while, slowly ease off of the brakes, and you turn in, and you want to go for a late apex so you can try to get on the throttle as soon as you can, because by that time that you hit the apex, your car should already be pointing where you want to go. Then for the series of turns, turn in just as you pass the 50 meter board, and it's all about throttle control through here. You can use a little bit of braking if necessary, but for the most part, you're doing a lot of throttle control. Get really close to the walls, bring yourself towards the right, and your final braking point is the 50 meter board. Quick burst of braking for this turn, and you just want to get on the throttle as soon as you can without hitting the walls. But that is pretty much it for this lap guide. Let's go ahead and take a look at the strategies. For the qualifying session, you'll have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time, which means that you'll have around 2 chances to try to get the best qualifying time possible. And don't forget that with this track, the pit stop is in the parking garage in the middle or halfway into a lap. So your out lap is going to be pretty short. So you have very little time to get your tires warmed up and to find a slipstream buddy, because with many high-speed sections, slipstream is going to be extremely crucial to try to go faster and shave off a bit of time. So yeah, the pit stop, once again, it's before the start-finish line, so you're only going through a couple of turns and you're already starting your first qualifying lap. And with all this slipstream stuff, your car is going to be able to go much faster, shave off a bit of time, but because you are going faster due to the slipstream, this does mean that you will need to brake a little bit sooner so you don't end up going into the wall or punting someone. Also, try not to hit the walls, because hitting the walls, even scraping a bit of the wall, will make you lose time. So try to keep it nice and clean, try to stay under the slipstream. So right now, I'm going to just go through the entirety of this lap. So pretty much up until here, I was just barely out of the slipstream of the Aston Martin as the green car is lagging like crazy. But through here, I was able to get into the slipstream, so I'm going to be able to go a little bit faster, especially as we go through the back straight, which is where the long tunnel is hanging out at. There is a chance that you might end up getting really close to the car in front of you, which means that you will need to do a little bit of bump drafting. So you bump the car ahead of you, then you go a bit faster, the slipstream makes you go faster and you bump them, etc, etc. So you two, or a group of you, will basically be doing this at some point, and you'll all be helping each other go a bit faster. But do be careful, with the braking zones into the docks and into the hairpin, because you're all going to be going much faster, so you need to brake a little bit earlier. And please do not start to fight with each other in your qualifying lap, because that is a great way to lose a lot of time. And with Slipstream being so crucial, even just a little bit of fighting can mean a lot of potential time lost. And also be a little careful as you go through the final couple of corners, because things will be a little tight, so you want to be a little easy on the throttle and just try to give the car in front of you a bit of space so you don't end up bumping into them. And once again, don't bump into the walls, because I pretty much just ruined my own lap time by having to slow down a little bit from getting too close to the car in front of me and hitting the walls. And in a moment, you're going to see me do the jump out and jump again strategy, in which I'll show it again when I slow down the clip in a bit. So this is where, after you do your first qualifying lap, you press options, exit, and in the lobbies you press enter course, or during the actual FIA race day itself, you press the qualifying button. You don't have to do this because tire wear is not an issue, but let's say there's a big group of cars ahead of you and they're starting to fight it out for some reason, then you can do this. But be aware that by doing this, there is a chance that you may end up doing another qualifying lap completely by yourself, so it's pretty much going to be pointless. But if there's multiple people doing it, then you can try to do this, so you can hopefully catch another Slipstream and get another chance to try to get a good qualifying time in. So once again, 5-minute qualifying time. Slipstream is crucial, but it is a bit of a double-edged sword, and you have 2 chances to try to get a good qualifying time. Also, make sure you don't hit the walls, because once again, they'll cost you quite a bit of time. But anyways, let's move on over towards the race section of this guide. So we are doing 15 laps at Tokyo Expressway South Inner Loop. We have the Group 4 cars that we'll be using for this race. Fuel is a times 6, which means that fuel is going to be a major issue. And the tire wear is a times 2, which means that tire wear will not be an issue for most cars. Front wheel drive cars unfortunately have a bit of a tire wear dilemma that I'll talk about later. Because the fuel usage is so high, this does mean that you will have to make a pit stop for fuel only, and you want to only go for a 1 stop, because the pit loss here at South Inner Loop is ridiculously high. We're talking at least 25 seconds. As for tire wear, it will not be an issue for most cars, but once again, front wheel drives, you'll have a bit of an issue that you'll need to figure out how to go about in your race. But anyways, let's talk about this first lap, because this first lap is going to be a bit weird. It'll partially be about survival and try to stay within the Slipstream. Your tires will be cold, so get ready to brake a little bit earlier, and you'll most likely be under someone's Slipstream, so once again, brake a little bit earlier. If you're starting right behind a front wheel drive car like the Peugeot RCZ, the Volkswagen Scirocco, Audi TT Cup, and the front wheel drive Megane, you might need to push the car a bit more so you can try to stay within the Slipstream, because those cars' accelerations, they are really good, which means that they can easily leave you behind. So you want to push the car a little bit just to try to stay in the Slipstream. And as you saw in this first lap, I had to push the car quite a bit so I can get into the Slipstream of the Peugeot RCZ in front of me and then start my fuel saving shenanigans. So in the first lap or two, this is something that you might need to do so you yourself can hopefully stay competitive just by staying under the Slipstream of the lead pack or whoever is in front of you. Because behind me, I don't know if you saw, we already ditched everyone behind us, so it's pretty much a 3-car battle for first place now. And all we're going to do now is just do a lot of fuel saving. So about this fuel saving stuff, your main goal is to use around 10 to 11% of fuel per lap while making sure that you're still keeping up with everyone in front of you, in other words, staying in their Slipstream. So there's a couple ways that you can go about fuel saving. One good way to do it is simply by short shifting. So you will need to use the manual transmission so you can control when to shift. If you're using the automatic transmission, then Unfortunately, you can't do this fuel saving method. The second way of fuel saving is to stay within the slipstream of the car in front of you. Once again, the slipstream range between yourself and the car in front of you is 3/4 of a second. So you want to be within this range so you can save a bit more fuel and your car will also go a bit faster. This will also tie in with teamwork, but I'll mention a bit more about that in a bit. The third way of fuel saving is by doing the fuel mapping adjustments. So if you're on the controller, press the left or right on your D-pad to change the multifunction display on the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and you'll see the fuel mapping. And then you press D up or down to change the values. By default, your car is at fuel map 1, so it is using all of the engine power, and because of that you'll be using the most amount of fuel. But if you bring it down to 6, which is lean, you'll be using the least amount of power, so your car will take longer to accelerate, but because you're using less power, your car will also be using less fuel. And in the fuel mapping, in the multifunction display, which I'll call MFD from now on, you also get to see the remaining laps. So in this example, I am starting lap 7 and I have 3.1 or actually 3.0 laps of fuel left. So if I were to keep going, I will run out of fuel at the very end of lap 9, starting lap 10, because I have to do lap 7, which is 1 lap, lap 8, which is 2 laps, and then lap 9, which is 3 laps. So just as I'm about to start lap 10, that is when I run out of fuel. And to the right of that, you'll also see how much percent of fuel you have left. And the fourth way, yes, there is a fourth way of fuel saving, is to ease off of the throttle before you reach a braking point. And you see me do this for the braking point into the docks and the hairpin where the pit stop is hanging out at. Especially with the slipstream, I can just ease off of the throttle and I'll be using a bit less fuel. And yeah, there's going to be a bit of ridiculousness when it comes to this fuel saving, but this is what you'll need to do to try to make the fuel last as much as you can while trying to make sure that you're still keeping up with the cars in front of you. And now let's talk about slipstream, because once again, slipstream, it is super important for a race like this because there are many high-speed sections, so you literally want to be going as fast as you can. And because this is a fuel saving race, the slipstream will also help you out with a bit of fuel saving. So you want to take advantage of the slipstream as much as you can and use it to work with other people, because working together is going to be crucial. It'll help you break away from those behind you, especially if they're fighting a lot, and it'll help you catch up to the next pack in front of you if there is one, especially if they start to fight a lot. So once again, you want to do a lot of teamwork. Slipstream is going to be key here, and you might even need to do a bit of bump drafting so you can try to go even faster. Just help each other go a bit faster, save a bit more fuel along the way. And I think I mentioned this earlier in the video, the amount of fuel that you want to use is at around 10 to 11% of fuel per lap. And this is because, once again, you want to try to make your fuel last as long as possible, but this is also because you want to have some extra fuel just in case people in front of you decide to pit much later. Once again, this is a one-stop for refueling, and hopefully you don't have to change tires, because if you do have to change tires, then that is going to create a bit of a dilemma. But once again, a bit more on that in a bit, because we are getting close to that part. So this race, if you split the 15 lap race into 2 halves, you'll have 2 7.5 lap stints. So you can pit in the middle of lap 7 and do the refueling. So at the bare minimum, you can make the fuel last 7.5 laps. But the reason why I say save up to 9 or even 10 laps worth of fuel is because some people may want to pit later. So depending on the fuel situation of whoever is in the front of your pack of cars, they may pit as early as lap 7 or as late as lap 9. And assuming that you're all not communicating with each other in a PlayStation party or in a Discord call, you're not going to know when they're going to pit unless they somehow make a super obvious sign of when they're going to pit. So you want to get ready to pit in with them whenever they pit, and hopefully you have just enough fuel to be able to pit when those people do. So for example, right here, the Ferrari was the leader of the pack and he went ahead and pitted at lap 8. So I'm going to join him because I want to stay in that good old slipstream, and also because I don't want to deal with the understeeriness of the RCZ because he pretty much has a lot of tire wear at this point. So only go in for a refuel and refuel to where the diamond is. You can try to refuel a bit past the diamond, so you can try to have a bit of extra fuel just as insurance in case you need to push the car a bit more. You'll know you have that extra bit of fuel. You're still going to do some fuel saving, but you can try to do a bit of topping off, but do be aware that this will cost you extra time. So because I decided to top off on fuel, I ended up falling a bit behind the Ferrari, and I now have to push the car a bit more to try to get back into his slipstream. Luckily, I did do the extra refueling, which means that I can afford to push the car a bit more. I can rev it out a bit more, and eventually I'm going to end up back on his slipstream, and then I could do a bit more fuel saving for the rest of the race. And once again, your pit window is in the middle of lap 7, in the middle of lap 8, or in the middle of lap 9. So you want to try to make sure that your fuel can last up to the middle of lap 9, just in case whoever is in the front of your pack of cars decides to pit in that late. And you want to pit in with everyone in your pack of cars because you want to retain that slipstream after you exit the pit stops. And also, let's say that you're able to do a really good job of fuel saving. This can mean that you will be spending less time refueling, which means that you could be jumping up a couple of positions compared to those who used up more fuel and have to refuel for a longer time. So that is something that you also want to think about. But anyways, your pit loss here is, well, it's going to depend on how much you have to refuel. So that number is going to vary. In the case of the Ferrari and our pit loss was at around 35 seconds, if I remember correctly. And in the case of the Peugeot RZZ that did the extra lap without us, he's going to end up losing a bit more time because he's going to end up changing his tires. So right now, he is about 35 seconds ahead of us before he entered the pit stops, in which the pit stops is right here, by the way. You saw it earlier in the video, but he did go for a tire change and refuel, so he's going to end up a bit further behind us. So the tire change, you lose an additional 3 seconds. So this is where the dilemma starts, especially if you're in a front-wheel drive car. So we're going to take a look at this race. So this was a race I was spectating before I entered the later race. So this person is in a front-wheel drive car, the Peugeot RCZ. We're about 27 minutes into the race, which means that these guys are, I think, on laps 13 or 14. So here is the thing. Front-wheel drive cars, tire wear is an issue. Even if you bring the brake balance all the way to the back of the car, your front wheels are still going to wear out. So you have a bit of a dilemma. When you do your pit stop for the refueling, do you A, stay on those same racing soft tires and eventually have to end up suffering with the tire, which makes your car understeery like this poor soul here? Or B, do you risk it, and when you go to your pit stop, do you also take new tires? And unfortunately, this is something that I cannot answer because it's going to all come down to the situation that you are in. Because if you do decide to take tires, you end up losing an additional 3 seconds in your pit loss. So let's say you already lost 35 seconds from the refueling. If you take tires, that adds 3 seconds. So now your pit loss has gone up from 35 seconds to 38 seconds. And if you saw in the clip before, this Peugeot RCZ driver, he ended up taking tires in the race that I was in, lost an additional 3 seconds, which means he ended up getting left behind even with a new set of racing soft tires. If he were to stay with those same tires, he would have ended up being right behind us, most likely be within our slipstream, but he would have to end up suffering with those worn tires. So it's a bit of a lose-lose situation for those in the front-wheel drive cars, and yeah, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. If you're in a lower split, you're probably going to actually want to end up taking those tires, because tire wear is going to be a major pain in the butt, and depending on your situation, again, it actually might be worth it in a lower split race to take those new tires. And this is just for the front wheel drive cars, by the way. If you're in a higher split, unfortunately, taking the tires might mean that you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot. So unfortunately for higher split lobbies, you're probably not going to be able to get away with a tire change, and you might end up getting left behind because you'll end up losing that slipstream from the additional pit loss time. Whereas with most of the other cars like the Ferrari 458 and my car, the Dodge Viper, tire wear is not an issue. Pretty much the most that you have to do is adjust the brake balance, and that is kind of it. So for example, in my case, I had the brake balance at +3 or +4. It was around one of those two values. Basically move it towards the rear of the car, because for the Dodge Viper, the front tires were out faster, and by bringing the brake balance towards the back of the car, it'll ease off some of that strain from the front tires of the Viper. And because I moved the brake balance on the Viper further to the back, I didn't have to worry about the tire wear. It was never an issue for this race. So if your front tires wear out faster, move the brake balance towards the back of the car. If your rear tires wear out faster, bring the brake balance towards the front of the car. And eventually we'll skip on over towards the end of the race, and I actually have quite a bit of extra fuel left because I topped off a bit, and I did some more fuel saving behind the Ferrari with the slipstream, fuel mapping, and the short shifting. So I ended up having a bit of extra fuel to play with, which means that I can push the car a bit more. And in this final lap, with extra fuel remaining, people are going to want to get a little more aggressive, whereas those who are still just barely having enough fuel, they're still going to be fuel saving. But for example, in this case, the car in first place and we were able to create a 4-second gap just by doing the bump drafting, and we're still going to be doing that because there's no reason for me to fight yet. If I try to get ahead at this point, then the Ferrari can easily overtake me on the tunnel straight. So I'm pretty much just going to be waiting until at around that point before I try to make my move on him. And once again, I can push a bit more because I have the fuel, I have extra fuel, so I know I can afford to push pretty hard. So this is where you're going to want to be a bit more careful about when to go for the attack, because you want to make sure that it is impossible for your opponent to have a response to your overtake. So if I were to overtake the Ferrari right now, they'll pretty much be able to slingshot past me after the tunnel ends. So you'll see what I mean right now. So I'm still going to be bump drafting him because I don't want to go for the move yet, but just as the tunnel ends, this is where it is time for me to make the move. And also be careful when braking for the hairpin, because I end up getting the overtake done, but I end up overshooting my own braking point, so he was able to make a response to my attempt to pass him. And that part before the hairpin is pretty much the last best place to get the overtake done, because through here it is still possible to get an overtake done, but it's going to be a lot harder to make it happen. So for example, right here, I'm stuck behind him. I can't really go for a move, and if he were to hit the wall between here and the final turn, I can try to go for the move, but he doesn't. He actually grinds the wall a bit. But I was able to get a slightly faster exit, and I could try to take advantage of the slingshot and try to get past him, in which it almost happens because he ran out of fuel just as we crossed the finish line. And we ended up getting a really close finish, so you have to try to make sure that you get your moves done just in time and make sure that it is impossible for your opponent to be able to have a response to it. But anyways, let's talk about places to overtake and the penalty serving zone. So the main street right here, it is possible to get an overtake done, and it's going to be the same thing with the second straight right here. It is possible to get an overtake done, especially with the use of Slipstream, but you want to be careful and plan your attacks just right because you don't want to lose any time when trying to pass someone. If you end up getting into long battles, you're going to get left behind because the pack of cars in front of you, they might be working together, they'll be bump drafting each other, taking advantage of the slipstream, and if you lose that slipstream of the pack of cars ahead of you, you're getting left behind. So plan your attacks carefully. This part right here is actually the penalty serving zone, and that is the only penalty serving zone here at South Inner Loop, so you don't lose too much time if you have to serve a penalty, but you still want to try to make sure that you don't have to serve a penalty. Even though this is a long quote-unquote straight, you want to stay in a single file line because things do get a little tight, and then pretty much the next overtaking spot, or the next best overtaking spot, is going to be after the tunnel straight. So from here to the hairpin, it is possible to get an overtake done. Just be aware that you might need to brake a little bit earlier, especially if you're under someone's slipstream. And after that, it's going to be a bit more of a single file line, but situations can arise where it is possible to get an overtake done. So pretty much for this area, I'll consider it situational for overtakes, but once again, try not to get into any long battles. You don't want to lose any time trying to fight it out with someone for position, and you don't want to end up getting left behind. You don't want to lose that slipstream because slipstream here, it's pretty much a life or death situation. But anyways, to summarize things up, this is a fuel saving race, so take advantage of the short shifting, the slipstream, the fuel mapping, and letting off of the throttle whenever possible before a braking zone, so you can try to save your fuel and make it last around 9 laps. And your pit window is lap 7, 8, or 9, so during those couple of laps, keep an eye out to try to figure out when the leader of your pack of cars is going to pit, because chances are everyone's probably going to follow them, so you want to follow them as well, so you can try to retain the slipstream when you come out of the pit stops along with everyone else. And this one stop is only going to be for refueling, and if you're in a front wheel drive car, you're probably going to end up suffering with lots of tire wear issues. So if you're in a lower split lobby, it might be worth taking new tires along with your refueling. And if you're in a higher split lobby with a front wheel drive car, you're probably going to have to be stuck with those same set of tires. But for all the other cars, the MR, FR, and four wheel drive cars, tire wear shouldn't be too much of an issue. And just remember that slipstream bump drafting, you want to be working with those around you to go faster and save a bit more fuel, because teamwork makes the meme work. And also, if you're trying to overtake someone, once again, plan your attacks carefully so you don't lose too much time trying to pass someone. But anyways, that is pretty much it for this guide. And actually, before I go, so I was making this manufacturer series guide when the lunar eclipse happened, so I want to show you a pretty cool picture that I took of the lunar eclipse from my backyard. And yeah, it was around 4:20 in the morning when it happened, and well, it's actually 5:20 in the morning as I make this video, so it's time for me to go to bed. But anyways, that is all from me. If this video helps, you can press the like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I do have a membership which you can check out in the description down below. But anyways, that is all from me, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. CA reminding you that teamwork makes the meme work, and please be nice to each other, and I'll see you all in the next video.